Back in the ancient era of 2004, Blizzard was deciding which classes would launch with World of Warcraft. There were the obvious ones: warriors, mages, rogues, the usual suspects. But there was one class, one glorious beard-tingling class that almost made it in. A class built around juicing themselves up with magical runes and then punching raid bosses right in their stupid face. It was the epic Rune Master, a mystical martial artist who carved glowing symbols into their own flesh and fought with enchanted fists of titanic fury. Depending on which developer you ask, the Rune Master was cut in favour of the Warlock or the Druid, which I think we can all agree was a terrible decision. We could have had Runic combo points, we could have had Forge Fu, but no, we got Tree Form. Great. While the class never made it into WoW, we did get a few glimpses of it in the Warcraft RPG. Not exactly canon, but not totally made up either. Think of it as Blizzard's sketchbook, full of weird ideas, scrapped concepts, and stuff that lives by the rule of cool, not balance. But here's the thing, rune magic didn't vanish. Runes show up everywhere in Warcraft lore. On titanic constructs, Vrykul tribes, Death Knight rune blades, and especially on the walls of dwarven halls. And in this episode, we're going to explore rune magic in all its glowy, stony, nerdy glory. Where it came from, who uses it, and what the heck it even is. And why dwarves should absolutely be given a Rune Master hero class, inked from head to toe, ripped like Hugh Jackman, and ready to punch a Felguard right in the throat.
Take that, you sod!
So, to understand runes, we first have to understand where their power comes from. Put simply, runes are like miniature recreations of naturally forming patterns baked into the world itself. Those patterns are called leylines. Think of them as Azeroth's veins, pumping raw magical energy through the world, but instead of blood, it's pure arcane goofy juice. These ley lines form complex magical circuits beneath the surface, and rune magic is basically the art of copying those patterns and locking them into stone, metal, or occasionally your own abs. It's like tracing over the world's magical blueprint and then using them to enchant your beard trimmer, or your battle axe, or a temple guardian that punches some poor chump from Khazmodan to Durotar. These flows of power now crisscross the planet, fueling sacred sites like Night Elf and Moonwells. At their intersections, you get sacred places of immense potency, the kind of energy that powered the Sunwell. However, those who study rune magic understand that the convergences of the ley lines are not the only important part of this power. It's the patterns the lines form. So, here's the big idea. Leyline intersections, those magical hotspots, are definitely spicy places to hurl fireballs or, say, open portals for orcs to rampage through. But they're not the whole story. Because people who truly understand rune magic know it's not just about raw power, it's about the patterns. The ley lines across Azeroth naturally form shapes, like magical fingerprints written into the land itself, each one a unique shape, made up of countless combinations of non-unique, repeating patterns that appear again and again throughout nature. And when you isolate those repeating shapes, you get simple runes. These foundational runes reflect the raw forces of the world, things like stone's strength, fire's fury, and water's flow. Tattooed across a rune master's body, they let the wearer channel those traits to strike like lightning, endure like oak, or burn like forge fire. A rune master might carve the rune of perfect steel into the back of their hand, a design pulled from the flow of energy inside expertly forged metal, turning their fist into a weapon sharper than the blade it imitates. I mean, picture it. A juggernaut of an orc warrior is butchering his way across the battlefield. Blood screams the whole package. Then, a mostly naked dwarf strolls into view. No armour, just ink and attitude. The orc cackles and mocks the unarmoured dwarf, right up until BAM! Runes activated, and the dwarf's fist punches clean through the orc's chest, armour and all. Ugh, goosebumps. But simple runes are just the beginning. Once you've got those basics down, stone strength, roaring flame, perfectly forged steel, the next step is combining them. And this is where things get really spicy. Because rune magic isn't just about carving one cool shape into your gauntlet and hoping it works. The true experts, the proper rune masters, learn to stack runes into patterns. Think of a rune pattern as a spell tree made of geometry. Each larger, more powerful rune is built on the structure of the ones below it, like arcane Russian nesting dolls. Say you start with a cantrip rune that channels the strength of stone. A more advanced pattern might layer that with resilience, and then reinforce it with magical shielding. Stack that just right and boom! You've got a runic ward of mountain endurance, or whatever epic names dwarves like to shout in battle. In other words, rune patterns aren't just random symbols mashed together. They're structured, interconnected, and shaped by the same natural rhythms that run through the earth itself. But a key thing to note is that a rune master can't just pick and choose how to stack these. Because remember, the rune master is mimicking the natural formations of the world. Rune masters will find and study these patterns throughout the planet. Some patterns are old, really old. Some are etched into ancient ruins to be found by intrepid adventurers, while others are buried deep beneath mountain ranges and they need to be sought out and then meditated on to gain an understanding of. Others are newer discoveries, only recently understood by scholars, and as rune theory evolves, new families of patterns are being discovered all the time. These might be pulled from elemental sites, arcane nexuses, and even places where death magic has warped the natural flow. The understanding of rune magic is growing, slowly, carefully, and very, very explosively. But I've teased your beards long enough. Let's look at a real example, the shielding pattern. This one was discovered in the mountains known as the Great Bulwarks, a series of jagged, interlocking peaks located near Grimbatol, with a metal ore content high enough to get a miner frothing at the mouth. The leyline pattern beneath this region makes it utterly impassable. Lava flows, thunderstorms, curious travellers, all has to go around. Nothing passes through or over the bulwarks. And that natural resistance to intrusion, that's what the shielding pattern is built on. This pattern has 10 evolutions. It goes from the mark of minor shielding, to the mark of lesser shielding, to the mark of energy shielding, to the sigil of dispelling, to the sigil of shielding, to the mark of greater shielding, to the mark of superior shielding, the mark of alternate shielding, and then, finally, to the sigil of ultimate shielding. If a rune master only uses the first rune, the mark of minor shielding, they're already tougher than your average foot soldier. Add the next rune in the chain, suddenly half the spells thrown at them are going wide. Not bad for a walking rune billboard. But when they master the full pattern, that bad boy is walking bare-chested towards an increasingly panicking necromancer, absorbing every spell thrown at him like he's straight out of a Jason Statham movie. Now tell me that doesn't scream next tank class in WoW. Now, the more attentive listeners among you might have noticed something. Some of those runes were called marks, and some were sigils. And to those of you who spotted that, congratulations, straight to the top of the class. Because yes, there are different types of runes. 3 types to be exact: marks, glyphs and sigils. The difference is simple. A mark is a rune inscribed on a creature, a willing one or at least a very still one. This is the kind of rune rune masters would tattoo onto themselves. A glyph is inscribed on an object, weapons, armour, tools, mugs. And finally a sigil. That's a rune carved into a surface. Walls, floors, doorways. The classic magical booby trap. Anyone entering a 5-foot radius can trigger it. And anyone standing within 30 feet of it is in for a bad day. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh my beard, the possibilities! And you're right, there are runes for everything. Want to heal your party? We've got the mark of regeneration for healing, the mark of purification for dispels, and the mark of resurrection for when Gary inevitably face checks another boss. Need to be tankier? How about a mark of evasion to dodge incoming attacks? Or the mark of the megalith, turning your skin to solid stone like an angry granite bouncer. Prefer to do the smashing? Activate a mark of speed to close the gap like a caffeinated goblin. Follow it up with the mark of hardened striking to absolutely flatten your target. And then, if your group isn't watching, activate the mark of teabagging. Okay, that one's not real, but I bet there are a few PvPers watching that would love it if it were. The point is, rune magic is wildly versatile, but it's got one big weakness. You can't just freestyle it. Without a physical pattern prepared, a rune caster is just a lore nerd with bad tattoos. No rune, no effect, no exceptions. To a degree, Rune Masters are always armed because they carry their magic on their skin. Those are permanent runes. And they're one of the 3 methods of rune magic that can be physically prepared and used. You've got permanent runes, spontaneous runes, and scribed runes. Permanent runes are the real deal. Tattooed, branded, chiseled, or etched with ritual tools. These runes don't fade when the magic wears off. They just wait. Want to empower it again later? Just channel the juice and boom, you're back online. But there is a cost. To create a permanent rune, the runecaster must pour a tiny piece of their own spirit into the work. It's magical craftsmanship with soul, literally. On flesh, that's tattoo or branding. On stone or metal, out come the ritual chisels. It's a serious commitment. Frankly, it sounds exactly like something a wildhammer would like. On the other end of the spectrum, you have spontaneous runes. These are your I didn't plan for this, but we ball anyway kind of runes. Every decent runecaster keeps a stash of quick cast rune plaques, little wood or stone slates they make during their downtime. They're like a magical version of those water tattoos kids think make them look like absolute kings, but they still need dad's help getting on. In battle, you grab one, slap it on the target and boom, rune activated, enhancement delivered. The rune disappears from the plaque and burns itself onto the target like a glowing magical brand. This is a one-step process. Placement and empowerment happen at once. Great in a crisis, awful for stealth. These things glow like someone cast arcane disco on your forehead. And no, you still need direct contact, and the target has to be willing, or conveniently unconscious. Then there's the middle ground, the scribing method, and most runecasters go to. This one's elegant. You take special magical inks or paints and carefully inscribe the rune onto a person, object or surface. These runes don't activate immediately. They sit and wait like magical big red buttons, just ready to be empowered later. When juiced up, they hit harder, last longer, and are way harder to dispel than spontaneous runes. Plus, you don't waste time or energy drawing the rune mid-battle. Efficiency. The rules are simple. Living targets must be willing or unconscious. Objects must be in hand when you scribe them. Scribed runes can last for days depending on the caster's skill. And when you finally power them up, glorious explosive chaos. All 3 of these methods have their place. Permanent runes for prep and reliability, spontaneous runes for fast, frantic magic, scribed runes for tactical flexibility and power. But no matter the method, one truth remains. Rune magic rewards preparation. And when the runes start glowing, you know someone's about to have a very bad day. Of course, even the best carved rune isn't going to do much if it's just sitting there looking pretty. To actually unleash the magic, to turn that fancy etching into an arcane freight train, you've got to empower it. And now we're at the final part of So You Want to Be a Rune Master. You've carved a rune, maybe on your gauntlet, maybe on a hammer, maybe into the floor of your mate's workshop for a laugh. But here's the thing, right now it's just a fancy scratch. Until you empower it, that rune is about as magical as a potato. Empowering a rune means flooding it with arcane energy, like flipping the on switch on a magical circuit. Without it, nothing happens. Currently, you are just a fantasy graffiti artist. Rune magic, then, is a 2-part process. First you create the rune, carefully inscribed to match the natural leyline patterns. Then, at the right moment, whether immediately or much later, you empower it. And this is where things get classy. See, a regular arcane caster has to wrestle the magic into the shape with hand-waving, incantations, weird ingredients and probably a lot of smug facial expressions usually found on the face of a pointy-eared elf. But a runecaster, they don't need to bend magic to their will. They just channel the energy into the rune, and the rune does the rest. Why? Because these runes are natural patterns. They already match how the world's energy wants to flow. No brute force, no arcane corruption, no whoops, I summoned a Fire Lord again. Just pure cooperative magic flowing into a pattern it recognises. This is the key difference between arcane spell casting and rune casting. Arcane casters force the magic to behave. Rune casters invite it to follow a shape it already understands. That's why rune magic doesn't cause corruption. It's not hubris, it's harmony. It's the magical equivalent of humming the world's favourite song and letting it sing along. So far, we've talked about how rune magic works, but now let's talk about the big dogs, the legendary rune masters. In the old Warcraft RPG books, the ones that feel like they were written by a sleep-deprived dungeon master on a Red Bull blender, rune masters were absolutely cracked. These were bare-chested bruisers who could punch through demons, block spells with their abs and drop magical landmines mid-fight. They didn't wear armour, it would just get in the way. If you saw one of these guys coming at you, you had two choices: pray to whatever god you believed in, or just accept your new life as a rune-shaped smear on the wall. Now obviously none of that is canon in modern WoW, but the fantasy, that vibe, is very much alive, because rune magic did come from somewhere. And here's the real kicker: rune magic didn't start with the Vrykul or the Death Knights or even the Dwarves. It started with the Titans. See, when the Titans arrived on Azeroth, they didn't just build giant robots and call it a day. They taught the Earthen, yes, our lovely dwarven ancestors, how to understand the natural energies of the world. That included runic patterns, drawn from the ley lines that wrapped around the world like arcane plumbing. This was the first age of Runecraft, a golden age. But over time, thanks to corruption, war, bad record keeping, and probably at least one dwarven brewery explosion, much of that knowledge was lost. Fast forward a few epochs, and guess who rediscovered the art? The Tauren. Seriously? The Tauren of the Plains independently rediscovered the concept of runes, not as arcane graffiti, but as symbols of natural power. They carved them into totems, armour, even the land itself, and their understanding was deeply spiritual, rooted in reverence for the elemental forces. And when the dwarves of the Alliance expedition arrived in Kalimdor with Jaina Proudmoore, they found more than new lands. They found a spark of memory. Though the dwarves and Tauren don't share the warmest of relations, they shared something older, a hunger to understand these symbols. Learning what they could from the Tauren, the dwarves took what they learnt back east, combined it with what they uncovered in Titan vaults and ancient ruins, and, slowly, the art of the rune master returned to them. Today, rune masters can be found among many races: night elves, trolls, orcs, but it's dwarves and Tauren who've taken it most to heart. For them, especially the dwarves, it's not just magic, it's heritage, it's restoration. Rune by rune, the dwarves are reclaiming something ancient, something that was never truly lost, just waiting to be remembered. Now, so far, most of our information has come from the Warcraft RPG. But here's the weird bit: the RPG portrays rune magic as arcane, drawing from the natural ley lines. But if you look at modern WoW, that's clearly not the whole story. Death Knights use rune magic, and they aren't exactly arcane scholars. Felcasters have been seen etching runes into summoning circles and bodies. The light itself is used in runic form. We see light forged runes that allow them to teleport. And then there's the Primus in the Shadowlands, who literally forges a runic language to control cosmic forces. So what gives? Is rune magic arcane? Fel? Light? Death? The answer is yes. This is a bit of speculation, but maybe rune magic isn't a school of magic. Maybe it's a method, a way of channeling any kind of energy by tracing the right pattern. That's the difference. A mage casts a fireball by dominating the raw arcane. A rune master channels flame through the rune of fire. No yelling required. Perhaps it's not about the source of power. It's simply about the shape it takes. In that sense, rune magic might be the most flexible casting system in the game. We've seen it evolve expansion after expansion, from classic to Shadowlands. Rune magic evolves with the game. It's different every time we see it, which begs the question: what if we got a real rune master class? Imagine, you pick your rune patterns from your talent tree, stacking effects to basically go Super Saiyan. You empower runes on yourself, your weapons, on the ground. You've got rune charges instead of mana. You could have even 3 specializations, something like Rune Striker, a melee DPS who powers up weapons like a Titan-fueled blacksmith. Rune Juggernaut, a tank whose tattoos wards their body and shrugs off magic like it's rain. Or, a Rune Warder, A support who draws sigils on the battlefield and buffs allies through glowing dwarven graffiti. Does it sound ridiculous? Yes. Does it sound awesome? Yes. Blizzard, if you're listening, please give the dwarves their due. Let us be rune-tattooed madmen yelling geometry at demons. Let us punch things with magic fists. Let us write dwarven destiny in glowing letters of fire. We don't need more sparkly elves. We need rune masters and enchanted toast throwing stars. So yeah, rune magic. It slaps, literally, sometimes through full plate. And I really do hope that one day we do see some kind of iteration of this in the game. A pipe dream? Maybe, but I would love it anyway. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the glowing, punchy, delightfully nerdy art of rune magic. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and consider subscribing to Dwarfhearth for more dwarf-centered lore from across the worlds of fantasy. Until next time, may your patterns align and your punches land true, right into a Felguard's throat. Thanks again.
See ya.